Hey everybody, happy Friday. Welcome to Mr. Spencer's math class. I'm so glad you're here joining us today. We are going to start multiplying decimals today. So we have already in the past talked about adding and subtracting decimals. I guess I'm going past that way, y'all. It's been a minute as I make sure I talk about the right way. We've talked about adding and subtracting decimals. Today we're going to start multiplying decimals. We're going to start using some place value charts and area models. We're going to move quickly today, so please utilize that big pause button to write down the notes once I have them written down. So I'll write them, you pause it, write them down yourself, and then we'll be good to go. That way I don't waste your time, I don't waste my time. I love it, y'all. Here we go. Let's start. We're going to start over here. I'm going to get up, and I am going to hit the right button today. Oh, we did. Look at that. Y'all, we're going to start before we get into the multiplying and dividing. I'm going to spin this way so we can see me a little bit better there. We're going to read this number aloud. 1.234. So I want you to read that number aloud using proper place value. Now here is where I become Mr. Spencer the Explorer and I say, that's right. That number is 1 and 234 thousandths. I know it's 234 thousandths because that 4 is in the thousandths place. And I remember that decimal place, we say and anytime we see a decimal place. So it's 1 and 234 thousandths. All right, let's do the same thing with this 65247. Read that number aloud. I can't hear you. Awesome. 65 and 247 thousandths. 65 and 247 thousandths. Again, that 7 is in the thousandths place, so we know it is 247 thousandths. That decimal place separates our whole number from our fraction. Awesome. So as we kick off today, before we get into multiplying and dividing of decimals, we are going to start with 6 practice problems adding and subtracting them. All right, so pause us here, take on these 6 practice problems, and then we'll be ready to go multiply. All right, perfect. So let's get into business here. Before we multiply decimals, I want to see if we can multiply some whole numbers. 3 times 2. What is 3 times 2? That's right, 3 times 2 is 6. What is 3 times 3? 3 times 3 is absolutely 9. And then what is 3 times 4? 3 times 4, that's right, 3 times 4 is 12. So we know how to multiply numbers. These are all whole numbers. Now we're going to get into decimals. Let's go. All right, so the first thing we want to do is make a place value chart. Our first place value chart is just going to have 2 columns. Our first column is the ones place, and the second column is the tenths place. So between our ones place and our tenths place, there is always something that goes there, and that is our decimal place. And today our decimal place color is green. So we've got a green decimal place between our ones place and our tenths place. Let's take a look at our first problem we are going to do today. Our first problem is 3 times 2 tenths. Now you're probably noticing how that looks very similar to that, only it is a decimal number instead of a whole number. Hold on to those thoughts and we will come back to that in just 1 minute. But we're going to start with our 2 tenths. So our 2 tenths means we're going to need 2 dots in our tenths column to represent the 2 tenths. This first number we're multiplying by, this 3, means we are going to need 3 copies of what we have in our tenths place. So I'm going to underline that 3, and we are going to go to the photocopier downstairs. Just kidding, we're not. We're going to stay right here and just draw a total of 3 rows. We already have 1, so we need 2 more rows. And there we go. We've got 3 copies of that original 2 tenths. Now what we have to find out is how many tenths do we have now? Well, that is super simple. We can count up those dots, and we see there are 2, 4, 6 dots right there. We see that there are still no dots in our ones column, so we're going to put a 0 there. And our decimal place is always between the ones and the tenths place. So our answer is 6 tenths. There we go. Super, super simple. Let's take a look at that. Awesome. So let's now draw my line across here, and we'll take on one that looks very similar, but is different. Here we go. It is now going to be 3 times 3/10. Now, do y'all see how that answer, sorry, jumping back up here, the answer we got for that problem looks like the problem 3 times 2, 3 times 2/10. It was very similar to 3 times 2. We'll see some more of that pattern in just a minute. Clearly did not make my chart long enough here, so I'm going to extend those down. And then we will take on 3 times 3/10. Well, that just got way too dark there. Let me lighten that up. There we go. That seems to be pretty decent. So 3 times 3/10. We're going to do the exact same thing we did with our tenths up above. We're going to put 3 tenths dots in our tenths column. And then we need to make 3 copies of those. This 3 represents how many copies we are making here. We always count the original in it. And then we have a total of 3 copies. So now we're going to count up how many total dots we have. We have 9 here. We have 9 tenths. So our answer is 9 tenths. How do we write that? 0.9 is 9 tenths. We could absolutely represent that visually here this way as well. 0 in the ones column, decimal place in the decimal place spot, and then a 9. Awesome. I love it. Let's do one more of these, and this one's about to get a little trickier. Let's slide this up. Move this across here. And reveal our next problem. Our next problem is going to be 3 times 4/10. We're going to follow the same exact procedure. We're going to start with 4/10. The 4 dots in the tenths column. And then one more time we need to make 3 copies of that. We have one. Here's our second one. And our third one. Alright, so now we've got it. We see there are our 12 tenths. So our answer is 0.12, right? No, absolutely not. We cannot have, that is 12 hundredths, not 12 tenths. Remember, we cannot, not ever have more than 10 in a place value. Well, more than 9. Once we hit 10, we've got to regroup and move one that way. So we have to take 10 of these little dots here. And 10 tenths becomes 1, 1. So then we're left with 2 dots in the tenths column, so we're left with 2 tenths. And then we have 1 whole. So our answer really equals 1 and 2 tenths. Now 1 and 2 tenths is the same thing as 12 tenths. We've just regrouped that. But in order to write our answer numerically, we have to regroup the 10 tenths and move the 10 tenths into 1 whole, or 1 ones. Awesome. All right, y'all. Well, now it is time for things to get trickier. I'm going to turn our paper sideways. I'm not. Oh, there is one more thing. Not yet. We'll get there, I promise. We're now going to make 3 columns because we're getting into the hundredths. I'm going to label my columns again, the ones, the tenths, and I'm going to abbreviate hundredths like that. So that's still going to mean hundredths. I'm going to abbreviate it for now. Our decimal place is still green. It's still right there. Awesome. And this time our problem is going to be 2, so we're going to need 2 copies, I know that, times 43 hundredths. Now if we wanted to, we could put 43 dots in our hundredth column, right? Absolutely, because this number is 43 hundredths. But we don't want to have to draw 43 dots. That is a heck of a lot of dots. So instead, I'm going to take this 4/10 because 43 hundredths is 4/10 and 3 hundredths. So I'm going to put 4 dots in to represent my 4/10 in the tenths column, and then have 3 hundredths in the hundredths column. And then I see that I need 2 copies of that. Again, same thing right there. So I have to make 1 more copy. Now we have a total of 2 copies. And we're going to follow the same process we did before. We're going to see how many tenths we have here. I have 8/10. How many hundredths do we have here? We have 6 hundredths. Still 0 ones. Our decimal place is still in the same spot. So we have 8/10, 6 hundredths. Neither of those are 10 or more, so we don't have to regroup anything. So our answer is 86 hundredths. 8/10, 6 hundredths. Together we can say that as 86 hundredths. Remember, because the 6 is in the hundredths column. Awesome. I love it. I love it. I love it. So, we're going to do one more of these and then move on to an area model. So the next one we're going to take on today is going to require some regrouping. Four times 423 thousandths. Oh no, looks like we've got to add another column down here. There's our thousandths column. I'm going to abbreviate thousandths TTHS. Alright, so we've got our ones, no one still. Then we have 4/10, 2 hundredths, and 3 thousandths. And then we need 4 copies of those. We already have 1, so we need 3 more copies. And then we are going to ask ourselves, how many do we have in each column? Okay, in the thousandths, there are 12 thousandths. Hundredths, there are 8 hundredths. In the tenth, there are 16 tenths. Hold up, that's an issue. Can't do that. Well, there goes the lights. Be right back. There we go. That's better. Now this will adjust too, and we will be back in business. So I know anytime we have more than 10 in a column, we have to regroup. So I have to take 10 of these because 10 is our magic number to regroup. 10 thousandths becomes 1 hundredth. We only have, now we have 9 hundredths, and that's okay. But we have 16 thousandths, so we've got, 16 tenths. We have to take 10 tenths and make it into 1 1. So now, instead of having 12 thousandths, we have 2 thousandths. Instead of having 8 hundredths, we now have 9 hundredths. Instead of having 16 tenths, we now have 6 tenths. Instead of having no ones, we now have 1 1. Our decimal place will go in the same spot as always. So now we have 1 and 692 thousandths. Put that up above here, 1 692 thousandths. Awesome. All right, I'm going to give you all 2 problems to try on your own, and then we will move on to an area model. We'll use an area model with bigger numbers. So for these first 2, I'm going to label them A. It's going to be 2 times 423 thousandths, and then B is 3 times 351 thousandths. So there are 2 problems for you to try on your own. Once you've got those drawn out, come on back and we will check or move on to an area model to solve one more problem. Awesome. All right, we are going to move into a different method to solve these problems. And it's called an area model. Now you probably remember area of a box or a rectangle. If you have a rectangle, Perimeter is the outside, right? And then area is what is in the middle. If you remember finding the area of something, you did length times width, and that was the whole inside. So that is sort of like what we are going to do right here. The first problem we are going to tackle is 6 times 1 and 21/100. Now, the reason we're using an area model versus using the dots in our place value chart is because we have to make 6 copies here. And making 6 copies of something would take a lot of time and a lot of work. So instead, we are going to make a box here for our area model. And we're going to make 3 sections because we have a ones, tenths, and 100th place. Now, we were talking about area where you multiply the length and the width, the one side and the other side. So we are going to do the same thing with our area model here. We're going to put our 6, our whole number, on the left side. And on top, we're going to decompose this number into each part. 1/1, 2 tenths, and then 1/100th. And then we're going to multiply our top number by the number over here. So we have 1 times 6. 1 times 6 is 6 ones. Then we have 2 tenths times 6. 2 times 6 is 12 tenths. And I'm labeling each of these with the unit that they are. And we have 1/100th times 6, which is 6/100. Now there's one last step, and that is to represent each of those as a digit or as a decimal in numerical form, and then add them together. So I'll put a plus sign between each of these, equals. So 6 ones would be 6. 12 tenths we know is 1.2, 1 and 2 tenths, so we'd have to regroup that. And then 6/100th is 0.06, our 6 is in the hundredths place. You can add all of those up. And I am already filling in my zeros because I know that that is where they would go. Because we always, always, always line up our decimal places. Oh, and I'm off the page there completely. So when we add up our products from below our area chart, we end up with 6 in the hundredths place, 2 in the tenths place, and then 7 in the ones place. Awesome. Looking good. There we go. All right, I'm going to give you all 2 problems to try on your own. Here we go. These ones are going to be the star problem and the triangle problem. Because we've used numbers, we've used letters, now we're on to shapes. Our first problem is going to be 7 times 2 and 41/100ths. And our triangle is 8 times 2 and 34/100ths. Alright, y'all take the time to solve these on your own, and then that will do it for our class today. Once you solve both of these problems, you are good to go. We'll dive back in on Monday with some practice, and then we'll start multiplying some decimals with digits rather than place value. Awesome. Y'all have an amazing, amazing weekend. I can't wait to see y'all back here on Monday. Bye, y'all.